So now we're gonna insert the Mickey Mouse hose. Make sure there's not too much dust around it, around the O-ring. Okay, this thing goes here. I'm gonna put a drop of oil on the O-ring to make sure it's gonna slide good. So this way we don't break the O-ring. So you just line this thing up here. You just push it in place. Once it's in, you put these both. Put this in place. Of course, you might have to turn a bit to line up the holes. I have removed the connector here to get a bit more room, so it make it easier to work around. It tends to get out from the bottom, so you might have to hold it in place to line up your bolts. Don't over torque that, you don't want to get trouble there. You don't want to make tap or decoy. But this is good. So now, next step will be I gotta remove this thing here. I gotta change. I gotta remove this bolt. I want to change the O-rings on the two hose here for the oil cooler. Also these one here, same thing. I want to. Well, there's no O-ring actually, so I want to put two new. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. So we stuffed some rags here because this thing's gonna leak probably. Oops, is it working? Yep, it's loose already. So I'm gonna remove this thing. So there's just one bolt here that holds this thing in place. And then it's one over the other. This is the setup. Let me grab just an oil pan. So we remove this thing by pulling it out. So you can tell here there's one O-ring. There's one O-ring here, if you look here. So I guess the other O-ring might be there, or maybe it's just... I gotta have to make sure if it's there or if it's maybe there was none. So I'm gonna clean this out, put new O-rings, and replace this this whole thing. So the missing O-ring, in fact, it's because I removed it this winter to get myself some O-rings to do that. So the O-rings for that are I don't remember. I have the size somewhere, but this is. It's the only these O-ring are like in the Imperial system, inches kind. So what I'm gonna do right now, I plug these two holes right now. I'm gonna hook up the cooler hose down here because what I want to do is I want to crank the engine by hand until I get the oil leakings from those holes. So that's more convenient to have the hose so I can line it up in the oil pan at the bottom, instead of making a mess all around. And once this is done, I'm gonna hook up this one and I'm gonna crank the engine with the starter. I can crank it now because there is I'm gonna remove the spark plug when I'm gonna do so, because I don't want to have any restriction. The idea is to get the engine running free to get oil in the oil filter. So once this is going to be totally full, it's going to start to leak at these cooler hose. Once this is going to be done, I can seal the hose. So the oil system is going to be a closed system, and I can crank it with the engine. There's no fuel actually, because the fuel pump fuse is removed. So when I crank, it's not going to flood it. And yeah, that's mostly what it is. So the O-ring, you just basically set them. These are the hoses that go up front. So you just need to set the O-ring over there around this thing like that. So you do that for both of them. Oh, this thing is leaking here. It's gonna leak at the bottom while I talk to you. So just clean this thing, put their O-ring in place, make sure which hose goes where, then you hook it up with the flange, and that's about it. Okay. So you insert this bracket in here like that. So these two are as one. Then you just slide this thing inside underneath the oil filter housing, and then you put the bolt in the middle hole here from underneath. That's all there is to it. So we're gonna put okay, we're gonna put a drop of oil on this these two O-rings. Make sure not to damage them, because if they grip and we tear them, that's going to be stupid. And it's a matter, I plugged the other end of the hose because I was tired of seeing that thing leak all over the place. So now it's a matter of just lining up this thing like that. Possible you might have to play a bit with the length of the sliding thing in between the two. Then you just put the bolt in place. This is the bolt for this one. Cooperation. We'll just start that with common sense. Be careful not to bang the radiator. I still have the radiator for the AC there. Make sure your hoses are lined up before you torque that thing, because you don't want to crush anything. So that's about it. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna line up these two holes at the bottom. It's not gonna be an easy one. I'm gonna try to set them in a way so that they're gonna leak straight down, because right now they're kind of free a bit. I want to make sure that it's gonna leak straight down, so I can set the oil pan underneath and be clean with this thing instead of having a mess all over the place. In fact, I think I'm gonna have to put a little jar there, plastic jar. So now I'm gonna remove my spark plugs. The spark plugs are loose at this time. I just put them on so there's no dirt going into the engine. So now it's time to remove them. Once they're loose, to take them out, you take a magnet. Okay, I'm gonna put them aside. So I'm gonna repeat that for all the 6 of them, and then I'm going to be able to turn that engine by hand, because I don't want the engine to have any stress. So if there's gonna be a built-in compression at this time, I don't want that, because I'm not sure there's oil all over the place. So by removing the spark plug, it's gonna turn freely without any compression. So I put the hose in the end in that little plastic jar right here. It's a good setup, it's not falling. All the spark plugs have been removed. The car is on neutral, very important, car on neutral. Now with the socket, I'm gonna turn this thing, I'm gonna crank it. I'm gonna crank it to reach oil leaking in here. I'm gonna crank it clockwise. That's the other thing, very important. I suspect this is gonna take some time. This is obviously gonna take some time. There's no other way around. It's gonna fill up the oil filter. So it's a game of patience. There should be just one of those that's gonna leak. The other one is the return line. So now that leaks. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hook up this thing back here, and now we're gonna crank it with its own starter to see. Let it crank for maybe a minute. So now it's time to install this thing. Just gonna wipe this thing off. Put a new washer, new O-ring, sorry. Put a drop of new oil on the O-ring. We're gonna slide this thing in place, removing the cap, both caps. And then the other one, new O-ring as well. Drop of oil, all around, and then you have to hook up with the other hose here. You don't have a choice if you want your hole to align. Then we put the bolt in place, torque that. Once this is done, we're gonna go there and we're gonna crank this engine with the starter. Remembering you that the oil is, not the oil, but the spark plugs are off, and the fuel pump is off because the fuse of the fuel pump is removed, so we're not gonna flood the engine. So we're gonna crank it for maybe a minute just to make sure it's gonna be full of oil everywhere. So I'm gonna get inside. When you crank it and there is nothing that's gonna start, you need to push again the start and stop button to stop it from cranking, else it's gonna crank forever almost. So you're gonna make sure you don't have anything in the area of the belt, because now we're gonna start it and we don't want to shred anything. Again, spark plug remove, fuse of the fuel pump out, so no fuel is going to be delivered, and car on neutral, very important. You're gonna have to hold the clutch and then we're gonna crank this thing. That's good enough. It gives it a chance to have oil with a bit more pressure going in the head. So now we're gonna keep going assembling this car. So I'm gonna insert my spark plugs. So I take a magnet. With the magnet I start to bolt it in place. So then I can pull out the magnet and the spark plug stays in. Then by hand you pick up all the loose, and then mine, the torque, my thread under my spark plugs is M12, so the torque for that is it's 204 pound-inch. So my torque wrench is already set. So now I'm gonna torque. I install all of those. I'm gonna torque all of those because I'm not gonna remove them anymore. They all install, so I just keep on going and torque them all. To install this thing, so there is this thing you just push once there's spark plugs or torque. What I do typically is I take a screwdriver and I just push here on this tab here, both sides. Just want to clip this thing in place. That's it. So you do the same for all of those. When you push it in and it gets a bit too far, you take one hooks like that and you just pick on the holes and you just pull a bit. So that's what I'm going to do with this one here. It's a bit too far. That's good enough. This one is good. Orientation I'm trying to correct a bit, because there's I put the holes on the downside, these two pinholes here, put them on the downside, and there's a plastic tab that goes here, so if it's not well located you can always turn it a little. So now it's time to put the coil packs in place. Coil packs, you line up this triangle here. There is a space here in between two tabs, two plastic tabs. This is how it goes. So you want to push this thing carefully inside, throw fully in, all the way in. Then you want to hook up this thing like that. And you repeat for all of those.